Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I try to really make sure our tone doesn't come off too high and mighty, know-it-all, because it's very easy when you record a podcast to lose sight of the fact that other people are listening and you're not just talking to your buddies. And so when we sound really sure of ourselves, or that we're, saying something completely correct, or we're doing anyone a favor, know that that's not our intention at all, and that we completely understand how much we get wrong. Although I will say we acknowledge and applaud ourselves for the favor we're doing Red Wings fans today, because as of right now, Wednesday night, there has not been end-of-season media availability for the Red Wings, and there has been no news of Jeff Blashill. And I know for a damn fact that the moment I hit publish on this episode in a couple hours, it's all going to come flooding in. This episode will immediately be rendered useless, and we'll have to wait until Sunday to update the news. So everyone waiting with bated breath, you're welcome, and we're truly martyrs.
I am aware of the limitations of my own intelligence, and there's only two things I'm sure of. I think, therefore I am, and late night bad timing Steve Yzerman news breaks. That's it. Those are the only two things I am absolutely 100% sure of in this life.
I genuinely sometimes wonder if Yzerman is aware of everyone saying, oh, we think the Blashill news is going to come quick. This is what we've heard. This is our opinion on it. And he's like, all right, fine. I'm in no rush. I'll hold it for another week now just because I'm going to go on vacation. Came back. Oh yeah, my bad.
I think it could even be a thing of, wait, I had to make an announcement. His contract expired. He no longer worked for the team. I didn't feel like I needed to address this.
Steve, what are we going to do with the coach? The coach. Oh, yeah. Jeff, again. A year. Who cares? See you later. Obviously, that's not how Yzerman operates, but it's sometimes how you feel. I like the collective anxiety Red Wings fandom, content creators, media all have, because we know that Red Wings news can drop at any hour. It really started with Ken Holland on his way out with the Nyquist trade, because that came in 12:30 to 1 a.m. or something, somewhere around there, I believe, or maybe even later. And ever since then, we've just been concerned. The Fabry trade followed the same suit. So my notifications are on, to say the least. Anyhow, this is us. This is the Winged Wheel Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
Evan is currently sitting at about 65% health. He's fighting his greatest enemy, pollen.
Pollen and the sun right now, apparently.
Your face.
Yeah, you kind of look like Geordi from Star Trek.
I can't wait to move because this is so annoying. I'm not comfortable at all, so I'm just gonna be irritated the entire time. But, maybe give it half an hour and I'll be good.
If only you had one of these beautiful Winged Wheel Podcast bucket hats, Evan. There'd be no sun in your face right now.
I don't know about you, Brad, but Ryan's video is so blurry I couldn't even tell.
He looks currently he looks like the lead singer of Wheatus.
I would agree.
Yeah, for anyone watching on YouTube, we've been messing around with some different hat suppliers because embroidery for our logo is a little bit cumbersome, and we want to make sure that if we're selling hats, they're good hats. So this is a bucket hat, a sample bucket hat that we put together. It's not bad. Anyhow, hockey talk. Let's do it. Winged Wheel Podcast. Today's episode, what we are going to be discussing is some Red Wings news. A couple players from this season are heading overseas and leaving the NHL. There's been a few rumblings in Buffalo. That is an evergreen comment. But this time seems really bad. We'll talk about that. The coaching carousel, hockey's own silly season has started in the NHL, so we'll update on some movement, especially relevant to Detroit. And then part one of our Detroit Red Wings season in review. We try to do a recap after every season, same way we do a preview. And this year we're splitting it up into at least a couple parts. So we'll be starting that today. Maybe some playoff predictions and overtime. So eventually these episodes will get shorter. I don't know at the time of recording how long this episode will be, but eventually they'll get shorter, but it doesn't seem like it's going to start today.
No, absolutely not. We got to save some content for the offseason. So for all of you who've been asking about like expansion, protection list conversations and more draft stuff and all that, it's coming, but we have to let you sweat it out for a bit first.
And just before we get into it, I do want to do my requisite shout out to the Jamie Daniels Foundation. It's a children's foundation initiative established in memory of Jamie Daniels and founded by Jamie's father and Red Wings lead announcer Ken Daniels and Jamie's mother, Lisa Daniels Goldman. The foundation strives to end the stigma of substance use disorder and provide support to those struggling with the disease or who are in recovery. Check out jamiedanielsfoundation.org to learn more and donate. You guys did just raise $4,375. So again, amazing from all of you. Okay. The Red Wings, both Christian Djoos and Matthias Brome have signed contracts or reportedly agreed to contracts to play overseas in Switzerland this upcoming season. It was a little bit expected with Djoos because, you know, there've been rumblings the past little while, and some people might have guessed with Brome because his stint in Detroit, not awful, but didn't really pan out the way he might have expected. So what does this mean for the Red Wings next year, if anything?
For next year, it means almost nothing, because as much as I liked both of them, trademark, they are not needle movers. So it's not the end of the world. It's an extra spot for a young player. I would say if I had any faith that these spots would go to young players, but it has to happen eventually. So it's fine. As much as I would have liked to have seen Brome get a lot more ice time than, the Helms of the world, and Djoos get a lot more ice time than the Biegas and the Stalls of the world this year. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. It's a bit of a wasted opportunity because Brome was what he was. He was, a mini Darren Helm, little younger, little faster, all the same problems finishing. I actually did really like Djoos. There was some potential there. So it's a bit disappointing to see him go, but I mean, the Red Wings have 1,000 defensive prospects in their pipeline and infinity cap space, so not a big deal.
Yeah, in your point about Djoos, like, he's obviously has his defensive woes, which is a little bit understating it. He's not a defenseman that plays defense well, if at all. But he did have that offensive value, and I think on a different team, he could have fit in a way that was viable. Like you said, is it the end of the world that he's leaving? No. And does it make sense? Yeah, because this Detroit team is completely schemed towards defense. So you're crippling the guy's, best asset or best trait and what he can bring to the team. He's essentially only useful on the power play, which is kind of not what you want from a defenseman. Like if you need the entire team to buckle down and play defense to have a chance at winning games, Christian Djoos is not going to be who you want. So yeah, I get it. Would have loved for this to be a situation where he could have fit in, because I agree he was fun and it was nice to see that offensive flair from the point. But that's also just not the team that the Red Wings are right now. So missed opportunity. And yeah, agreed on Brome.
Yeah,
a strong start.
My big concern with losing Djoos, and I shouldn't even say big concern, my only concern is if they also lose Cholowski in the expansion draft, because then they quite literally don't have a power play quarterback option almost in the franchise at this point. I think Seider's capable, but I think we all know that's not going to be his specialty. And even if you ask him to do it next year, I mean, he's a rookie, no matter how good he is and how good at that he eventually could be, he ain't going to be it next year. Because Filip Hronek, to the naked eye, was a train wreck on the power play, and the analytics were somehow even worse. So yeah, because Djoos and Cholowski were really the only two defensemen they had who were, quite honestly, it sounds a little overdramatic, but capable as the power play quarterbacks. And I wouldn't even say either of them were particularly above average at it, but capable. So if one of them's gone, so I would hope this is a good sign for Cholowski, that he'll probably get that last protection spot, because you need someone like this at some point in the organization. So we'll see. Time will determine that one.
And okay, that's like that's really the only Red Wings roster news. So let's move on to the bigger roster news. Do we want to start with Eichel or do we want to start with coaches? Up to you guys.
Let's get the trade rumors out of the way.
Yeah. So Jack Eichel pretty strongly hinted that there's a very big disconnect between him and the team in Buffalo. A lot of it has to relate to the injury that he has. He wants a special kind of surgery that's still largely experimental in pro level athletes, and the Sabres are on the rehab it with time and you'll be better for next year train. The way the CBA is laid out is that the cards are ultimately in Buffalo's hands. Eichel can file a grievance, he can get a second opinion, but as of right now, Buffalo does make the call. But at the same time, Eichel is still one of the best players in the league. He's one of the best centermen in the league, especially. He is the franchise piece for Buffalo. So even though the cards are in their hand, you don't want to piss him off. And right now it looks like that line's been crossed. A lot of people are speculating that Eichel might not be back in a Sabres uniform next season, and I don't think it's crazy to think.
So his whole statement was pretty damning. He worded it very eloquently, and he wasn't just inflammatory in the way he said it. Like, he did choose his words carefully to make it clear he wasn't unhappy without just dropping F-bombs and screw this, I'm out of here. But there was one line that kind of got glossed over a little more than I thought it should have. And it was like the very last line in the quote where he said, my goal now is to just rehab in this offseason and get ready for next season, wherever that might be. Players do not say that unless it is at the forefront of their mind. Players assume they are going to play for their team forever until they hit free agency, and Eichel's nowhere near free agency. So him saying wherever that might be is the biggest red flag.
Yeah, Reinhardt's media availability, it was overshadowed by the whole Eichel thing, but he looks like he wants out too. And his way of saying he wanted out was a little bit more traditional with what you see in hockey. Like you said, Brad, even when a player is extremely upset, they're pretty diplomatic about it. Just hockey is dull like that. Like, you don't have really NBA, NFL style, for better or for worse, trade demands publicly. And Reinhardt's fit that bill. So Reinhardt's also in this conversation too, but no, with Eichel, that comment of wherever that may be, I was like, oh my God, he might as well have just stabbed Kevin Adams right there. Not that I think Eichel is stabbing him in the back or anything, but yeah, it's a pretty big disconnect. We can talk on and on about the train wreck that Buffalo is, and I think we need a separate podcast for that. And I've heard there's already a guy in Buffalo who shouts on the radio about that kind of thing, so we don't want to step on those toes. So let's talk a little bit about what comes next, which is Eichel trade rumors. I know, Brad, your favorite. We are going to give this the thought of, what would this look like for the Red Wings, and in general, what would it cost to get Eichel? Because you don't find a franchise centerman controlled for the next however many years for cheap. That's going to be an expensive trade, but Buffalo's in a bit of a bind, so maybe he can be had cheaper than people thought.
Yeah, I was listening to a lot of podcasts over the last 48 hours because I really wanted to get a good feel for this situation. Because obviously we pay attention to the entire NHL, but we do spend most of the time in our little Red Wings bubble. So I wanted to really get a good feel for the situation before we talked about it. Because again, a guy like Jack Eichel doesn't go on the trade block often. This would be a once every 10 years type trade. When was the last time a player of Eichel's magnitude got actually traded when he was reasonably young? Thornton out of Boston?
Taylor Hall? That's the only one I can think of.
Nah, Taylor Hall's nowhere near Jack Eichel's level. I don't care what anybody says.
Hasn't won a Hart.
Fair. But I would still argue Taylor Hall shouldn't have won that Hart, but I digress. But yeah, so sounds like because of the injury concerns, the lack of production this season, the turmoil in Buffalo, and Buffalo not exactly holding all the chips in this situation. They still hold most of them, which is relevant. But that this might not be as massive as a return as we would thought, because I would have thought you're trading for Eichel, you are giving up a star player, a great prospect, and multiple first-round picks. Like, if I'm Buffalo, that's my ask. So in Red Wings terms, I'm not moving him unless you give me Larkin, Veleno, and 2 first-round picks. Like, I'm not even returning your call unless you leave that in the voicemail.
Best I can do is Taro Hirose in a 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put this out there for both of you. Larkin, Veleno, and both 2021 first-round picks. Do you do it?
No.
If the Red Wings were closer to contending, I would do it in a heartbeat. But given that most of Eichel's prime would be wasted while this team turns it around, I probably would shy away. And I'm not saying no because of value. I'm saying no simply because of timelines. I don't think Detroit makes a lot of sense for Eichel because he's, 25? So if you're optimistic and you think the Red Wings turn around in 2-3 years, you're really only getting 2 to 3 good years out of Eichel. Now, don't get me wrong. 2 to 3 good years out of Eichel is one of the best players in the world, but you have to be absolutely certain you're a contender in those 2 to 3 years, and the Red Wings cannot say that confidently right now. With Eichel and their prospects continuing to develop the way they look like they are, they very well could be. But that is a hell of a gamble to take. But if the price came in less than that, I'm absolutely taking that gamble 1,000 out of 1,000 times, and I'm not thinking twice about it. But quite honestly though, I think Buffalo's going to get better offers because there are teams who are more interested that have more to give. So even if Detroit wanted to, I don't see them winning this bidding war.
I also think it's a terrible look optically for the Red Wings if they move Larkin and the haul isn't a king's ransom. Like, if the Red Wings didn't fleece Buffalo and traded Larkin, I think the city would burn because you just traded your captain, someone the fans have really rallied around and really like, and you got a guy who's been very vocal about not wanting to be somewhere, and you don't want Detroit to become the next place he doesn't want to be. So the haul would have to be it would have to be a fleece for a lot of Red Wings fans to really appreciate that trade if it involved Larkin.
I don't think I don't disagree with you, Evan. I just don't think with mega trades like this, when you're talking about the moving Jack Eichel, think back to the Erik Karlsson. I don't think you can properly diagnose or assess a trade until afterwards when you're dealing with big stars like that. It's just too difficult. There's too much value being moved around and you don't know how things are going to land. Like the Karlsson trade is essentially a 180 of what a lot of people thought it would be at the time. And so I think it's harder to assess those deals. I also think it's harder to fleece a team. And if I'm going to be a little bit sacrilegious, the only circumstance where I think it would be appropriate for Detroit to, don't think twice, trade the captain and the heart and soul of the team is when you're getting a player of Jack Eichel's caliber. I really don't want to understate how good Jack Eichel is. Like, take this year out of the picture. This is one of the best players in the NHL. He's just playing on a terrible team. Red Wings fans should know all about players' true performances being muted because they're on a bad team. Like, very few. The only Red Wing with really good output this year didn't play on the Red Wings most of the year. Like, we know all about that. So,
and
Jack Eichel would be a haul.
And it's worth noting, Eichel played this entire season very hurt for the times he was playing. So it's easy to forget how dominant Jack Eichel was because the season before, up until a weaker, I think it was final month of the season, Jack Eichel was very much in the Hart conversation. Like, he was a legit MVP candidate 2 seasons ago. So, yeah, it would happen. But I think we can talk about the Red Wings specific assets and window and everything we want. But when I'm looking at a Jack Eichel trade, I look at the New York Rangers and I look at the LA Kings and I go, both these teams make way too much sense and they have way more to give up than the Red Wings do. What was it when the farm system rankings came out? Detroit was like third, and the 2 teams ahead of them were LA and the Rangers, and they are closer to competing than the Red Wings are. Yeah,
closer to competing, better city, like more desirable cities in general that players like to go to. Those are huge markets. Like you said, they have the cap space, they have the assets to give up. Like, it's all there. It just makes too much sense.
Yeah, like the Rangers, like if you're talking about the premium piece in the trade for the Red Wings, it would be Dylan Larkin, who's 24. So they're not the Sabres, for all intents and purposes, are not getting an upgrade in age. The Kings have a Quentin Byfield to offer. The Rangers have a Lafreniere, a Kakko to offer if they want. And then that doesn't even count their stable of prospects. Now, this is where the Red Wings are strong as well, but not as strong as these two teams. And they don't have the premium piece to give up like these teams would. So, like I said, even if the Red Wings were super interested, even if the Red Wings were willing to pay a premium, I still think they'd get outbid by one of these teams. So when it all boils down to it, I don't see Eichel being a legit candidate to end up in Detroit.
I don't know what Kevin Adams' deal is. Like, I don't really know what's happening behind the scenes, so I don't want to make an assessment of his job as GM. I will say if he deals Jack Eichel and he does not get Quentin Byfield, Capo Kakko, maybe Alexis Lafreniere, although I don't think New York would even consider that, or something of that caliber. Like you said, Brad, both teams do have a lot of high-end players in their system. If you don't walk away with one of those players,
So
I just don't know what you're doing as GM.
Here's an interesting trade proposal that I was thinking about, and your thoughts on this. So factoring age, how quickly each team wants to contend, and what both of their ultimate ceilings are. If you're the Buffalo Sabres, do you trade Jack Eichel straight up for Alexis Lafreniere?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. You consider the situation, you consider you have 10 mil coming off the books, which is going to matter to the owners because they're not going to spend that much money on a team that's not performing. Absolutely.
Okay, Now follow-up question.
Rangers would have to move somebody because they've got no cap and they've only got Brendan Smith, rest in peace, coming off the books.
They don't have LA's cap situation for sure.
So they'd have to get some dollars out going back Buffalo's way because I'm sure as hell Buffalo doesn't want to retain anything on a $10 million salary.
Yeah, but then follow-up question. Like, let's be honest, the salary cap's not real. If Tampa can make it work, everybody can make it work.
Also true.
If they're desperate enough. So you would do that trade if you're Buffalo. Now, if you're the Rangers, do you do that trade?
I don't. If I'm the Rangers, I really don't. I don't know. Like, you're never going to be worse off if you're adding Jack Eichel. That should be clarified. But at the same time, I think when I say this makes sense for the Rangers, I mean their owner just fired the president of hockey ops, the GM, and the head coach. Chris Drury's going to be under pressure to do something big to push this team further along the timeline because Dolan wants a cup now because windows don't matter, timelines don't matter. That's why I think it makes sense. Do I do it if I'm New York? I don't know. Like, it's certainly a possibility, but I'm not jumping at it. Like, I'm not forcing the issue. They seem reckless right now, so I feel like they would just kind of do it without blinking.
I don't know if I would do it for sure at the Rangers, but I would strongly consider it because then you're basically building your team like the Leafs, except they have one thing the Leafs don't. They've got two young top-end goaltenders. That is not a concern for that team, where it's still a big concern for the Leafs. They have Shesterkin and Georgiev. They already have Panarin and Zibanejad. Now you put in Jack Eichel in there. You still have 2 more years of Alexis Lafreniere at an entry-level contract, so that's going to be very appealing for Buffalo. You still have Capo Kakko with 1 year left on his ELC, and if his metrics look like he was progressing well this year. So, I mean, you could build an absolute horse around that top 6 and that goaltending. If they can get just competent defending, they could be an elite team as early as next year with Jack Eichel. And let's not forget, they might have a Norris candidate on their roster already. Adam Fox, actually, he absolutely should be a Norris candidate this year. I shouldn't even say might. He should be the runner-up this year. But yeah, I honestly, it makes too much sense for both teams. So because this is the NHL, it's not even going to be considered.
Yeah, it's going to be something weird. Like Philadelphia is just going to decide that screw that, whatever that team has to do in terms of rebuilding, they're just going to do it.
He'll go to Minnesota or something.
Someone,
Minnesota
I think it was Evolving
does make
Hockey.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, that was kind of my dark horse when I was looking at Cap Friendly. Like, I see, other than the fact that they have no money, but they do have a lot coming off the book this year. There could be some potential there too. But I mean, I guess Jack Eichel, he does not have a no move clause, right?
It kicks in after this upcoming season, so they have a time limit to trade him.
Okay, because if I'm Jack Eichel and they're like, you can go to New York, LA, or Minnesota, I'm definitely going to New York or LA.
Yeah, no,
Evolving Wild put this out kind of like mostly trolling. If you're Minnesota, do you trade Kirill Kaprizov for Jack Eichel straight up?
1,000% yes. My God, yes. I don't even think twice.
A lot of Minnesota fans are really upset.
I think they want Kirill the Thrill to play with Jack Eichel.
I mean, yeah, that's ideal. They said that, and I was like, I'm almost happy the Red Wings aren't in that window. I don't mean that at all. This is hell. Please, I can't wait till we're good again. But I'm almost happy the Red Wings aren't in that window where we have to consider, do you trade this, who you thought was your franchise player, for someone who definitely would be a franchise player, but for a lot more money, and there is some uncertainty. Like, those are tough decisions. So, yeah. Undoubtedly, we're going to be bombarded, like that gif of the kid being hit with backpacks in the classroom, with Eichel trade proposals. So, we'll pause the Eichel talk here. We'll see how this progresses. For what it's worth, Kevin Adams said in media availability that Eichel has not requested a trade. I don't trust anything at all.
Yeah, Eichel did not request the trade. His agent did.
Kevin's like, yeah, I got you there, reporters. Let's talk about some other movement around the league in terms of coaches. John Tortorella agreed with the Columbus Blue Jackets, mutually agreed to part ways, which, I mean, has been coming for some time. It seemed that both parties that relationship had to run its course, and it didn't end terribly. Like, it didn't all go up ablaze, but it just seemed to be the right timing where Tortorella was like, yep, I want out, and Kekalainen was like, yep, you keep benching our best players. Rick Tocchet in Arizona, same thing, mutually agreed to part ways. And then the massacre in New York continued with Quinn being fired as head coach. So Dolan wasn't done. He had the presence of mind to wait till the end of the season for the head coach, but not the GM and president of hockey ops. So lots of movement. And of course, no news on Jeff Blashill.
Yes. I see where you're a Red Wings fan. The pain never stops.
No, it really doesn't. Again, I'm so certain it's going to be Thursday morning where this news is going to come out. Like, they're going to announce it with the media availability, but at the time of recording, there's no news. I think all three of our guesses are still that Blashill comes back, though, right?
Yes.
That is my prediction, yes.
I thought Brad just looked at his phone and had some updated information.
I know. And it usually is Brad who, like, he's like, and just 5 minutes ago, Jeff Blashill was elected president of Slovenia, so he can't coach next year. Something stupid like that.
No, I was sending in a trade proposal to Crystal, some of her time and effort in exchange for my water bottle.
I'd tell her to hold out. She can get more on that. All right, what does that mean for coaching around the league? Seattle still technically doesn't have the coach. It seems like the rumors of Rod the Bod potentially leaving Carolina were not founded in a lot of reality. It seems like a deal is almost done there. Good guy Rod wants to make sure that the staff in Carolina are taken care of. What does Seattle do here? Who do they jump on? Is it someone who's a free agent right now? Do they take an assistant? Do they take someone from, the AHL, someone from Europe maybe? Do they look in other leagues across North America? And does any of it affect the Red Wings and Blashill? I know the boring answer to that is no, but just wanted your thoughts.
So Elliot Friedman was reporting that Seattle would like experienced coach. They don't want someone new. So I think that rules out the European and the AHL options. So then you have to look around which seasoned NHL coaches are free agents right now. So obviously the first name that comes to mind, because he did it with the last expansion team, is Gerard Gallant. So that would make a lot of sense for Seattle because he's quite literally been there, done that, and he's the only one who can say that in this very unique situation. Then you look at Bruce Boudreau, who is still sitting there, and you also have, dare we say John Tortorella? Dare we say, I don't know if Rick Tocchet would fit the bill for experience that they're looking for, but he's had enough time as an assistant coach that wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. But yeah, I think out of all the
he was head coach of Arizona, right?
He was head coach of Arizona, but he was an assistant coach with Pittsburgh for a while before that.
Got it.
So in my opinion, of all the the openings for a coach in the NHL right now, Seattle's the second most appealing. So they will get, for the most part, their pick of the litter. I view the Rangers as the best opening just because that's a team on the verge of being very, very good and a cup contender. So if I'm a free agent coach, that's choice number one, despite how crazy the owner is. You give me a Lafreniere, a Kakko, a Zibanejad, a Panarin, an Adam Fox, a Shesterkin, and I'll make something happen. But I think the Rangers and Kraken are going to be looking at two different types of coaches. So I don't know. It's a weird year because I think Columbus and Arizona will be competing with each other for coaches because I think they're going to want to keep it cheap and maybe are open to the possibility of an inexperienced coach. And the Rangers and Kraken are going to compete with each other because I think they're going to be looking for they're going to be willing to pay a little more and they're going to look for a little more experience.
I got a tinfoil dark horse pick for this. I'm going to say Paul Maurice. I'm going to say Winnipeg gets bounced in the first round and they haven't won anything under him yet. And they go for a new direction with all the coaches available and Paul Maurice goes to Seattle.
You think, I don't know, I kind of feel like Seattle will want it sorted before then, but maybe, they wait to see how the playoffs work to see what
when you're
coaches
bounced
shake
in the
loose.
first round, that's only a week or a week and a half away. That's just a dark horse one. I'm not saying like that's where I'm putting my money, but I could potentially understand that.
And the two teams we hadn't even mentioned yet is let's not forget Buffalo and Montreal still have interim head coaches. So given what he's done in Buffalo, I'm guessing Don Granato is going to stay on as the coach there. He did an actual pretty good job with them, especially given the circumstances after Kruger was relieved. If Montreal gets bounced in the first round, I don't think Ducharme sticks around, so Montreal could be another candidate. I don't know how many French Canadian coaches are available because we know how much that's important to them. So yeah, I don't know. It's there for the coaches that are available and how many spots are open. It feels like there's going to be one or two big names that are going to be left standing at the altar when it's all said and done, because if Ducharme gets let go in Montreal, let's say Gallant goes to Seattle, Boudreau goes to the Rangers, Columbus and Arizona hire some guys out of the AHL, Tortorella could be standing there on the outside looking in. Tocchet could be standing there on the outside looking in. David Quinn, I mean, if it goes like that, that means Montreal is the only job left open. That's two pretty significant coaches just left in the dark.
I really wish Brind'Amour Moore would have hit the market. Not because I want bad things to happen in Carolina, but because I know he's going to sign for cheap there, cheaper than what he's worth. But if he went on market, he would be an expensive draw for some team, and they would be crawling over each other for him. And honestly, I would be clamoring for the Red Wings to pick him up too.
I absolutely would be too, but I'm not so sure that would happen because there is the feeling going around the NHL right now, and several big reporters are reporting the same thing, that teams are reevaluating how much they pay coaches and executives. Like, are they really worth the amount? Like, depending on the team and the situation, it's easy to say, yeah, of course they are. But if you can get an effective coach, like Rod Brind'Amour was making nothing, and he might be the best coach in the NHL. So teams are like, we can get bargains, and we're all hemorrhaging money right now. So do we want to go pay $2-3 million a year for, I don't know, pick a name, John Tortorella, when you can take a chance on a Lane Lambert for $900,000? I think outside of Seattle and the Rangers, that's probably going to be what any team looking for a coach is going to do. So it's going to be fascinating because we know who the candidates are. We know what the openings are. And I don't have any good guess where any of them are going to land. The only one that I can look at and go, that makes a lot of sense, would be Gallant to Seattle, which means it's definitely not going to happen.
I'm going to redirect just with one kind of final thought in this coaching business. We've all voiced our opinions on what we would like to happen with Red Wings coaching, and that's kind of evolved a little bit over the year, and we'll get into that on part 2 of the season reviews. We'll talk about coaching, but we've also all voiced our opinion on what we think will happen, which is that Blashill will return. I get the sense in general, and this is a loose comparison, that the Red Wings in 1 to 2, more likely 2 years, will be in a similar position to Toronto, where they were when Mike Babcock left to Detroit to go to Toronto. I don't equate that completely. I think Toronto is to hockey, like, you're the only way you find that passion beat in sports in North America is when you get into like college football. Like, people are manic about hockey in Toronto and the whole legacy and prestige that comes with bringing a cup to Toronto. Like, it's not a slight on Detroit or any other team. It's just, that would be the holy grail for anyone who has any kind of affinity towards Toronto. And, you know, Canadian guys like Mike Babcock obviously will often have that. But in a couple of years, Detroit is going to be primed to have a ton of fantastic young players on their team. Moritz Seider will be on the team by then. Larkin will be more established. Zadina will be established. Raymond will be playing by then. Like, they're going to be well geared and moving in the right direction. They'll likely still have another top pick and a chance at a lottery pick in a couple of years. Who knows? And the team has a ton of great cap space to work with and an excellent GM whose reputation precedes him. Honestly, I could see Detroit having the pick of the litter in 2 years as one of the most desirable places in the NHL to go coach. And that will be the first time in a long time that we would have been able to say that. Is that biased on my end? Yeah, probably, but it's just kind of how I see things. That's the timeline for like turning it around as a desirable destination, so to speak.
So here's my only question to that. If the Red Wings are really turning it around in 2 years, you're not getting rid of whatever coach got you there. So if that's Blashill or someone else, they're not going to, if they're happy, that you don't screw with happy, you're going to keep that coach around.
Well,
the only
first year in Toronto, they weren't good though. Remember that.
Yeah, but we all knew where they were going. They had Matthews, Marner, Nylander. Like, this was not shocking. Toronto was unbelievably desirable, but Toronto was also impatient. There's one thing Detroit is painfully not, and that is impatient. The Rangers are a weird one because everybody, like, David Quinn seemed to be doing an all right job and the team turned around. It's just the owner's crazy. So that was a unique situation. Chris Ilitch is not James Dolan, so we're not going to have that sudden, oh my God, what the hell just happened? So, especially with Yzerman at the helm, you know, I'm sure he's got complete trust. So if he says, hey, yeah, it's taking a while, but like, this is going well, they're not going to rush from anything. So I do think you're right that the Red Wings could be in a very similar position to the Rangers now in a few years, but I think when they get there, it won't be with the new coach, or at least they're not going to switch coaches when they get to that point.
I think we should not be predicting what Steve Yzerman will do. That's the only reason I think it's viable. I think
this is more a thought on Chris Ilitch than anything else.
I think the days are gone where Chris Ilitch has a lot of say in the coaching. I don't see Yzerman coming on board to this with any kind of the same control that the Ilitch family kind of exerted over Holland. And that's not to absolve Holland of the moves he made as GM, but there's no question about the fact that the Ilitches had their thumb on the go for the playoffs button for a lot longer than maybe that should have been the case. Okay, that's about 40 minutes of pre-main topic of the episode talk, which is a testament to what the Red Wings offseason has looked like for the past however many years. Let's start our Red Wings 2020-21 season review process. And today, depending on time, we're going to be starting with defense and goalies. And kind of just moving through, discussing what happened player by player, in general, overall throughout the season, team defense, that kind of thing. And basically dissect what this past season was for Detroit. Where do we want to kick off?
Are we doing player grades like we did last year? I forgot to ask that.
Yeah, let's do some player grades. Sure. I think it's going to be complicated with player grades this year just because of
I'm doing
a lot of different things.
I'm going to do mine relative to expectations going into the season because it's easy to say, oh, top player, A+, he was the best player. Oh, worst player, D-, he sucked. How did they perform relative to what we were expecting?
So do we just want to go through the roster and go player by player before speaking?
Yeah, because that will lead to bigger conversations, right? And then kind of the general overview at the end.
Let's start with the big one. Filip Hronek.
Okay. Thanks for easing in.
Yeah, Filip Hronek, if you don't count Vrana, who came into Detroit after the trade deadline, Detroit's leading point getter with 26 points. 24 of those were assists. A shocking amount were secondary assists. He had 2 goals, neither of them on a goalie, both from across the ice on an empty net, which in my mind equally is impressive, but still. But also, Filip Hronek had his woes this year. How are these player grades going? Are we based on our expectations of them coming into the season?
What did we expect from them this season, and how did they perform relative to that?
Look, I don't know how else to say this besides disappointing. And I know the counting stats are there for Hronek, and he outperformed a lot of the team. And yeah, that's the case. Like, I'm not saying he had a complete drop off. He's not all of a sudden a useless player. He's not all of a sudden just, a third pairing defenseman at best. But this was not a good season for him in terms of progression. You want to see a guy like Hronek refine his game and play better. And by all rights, there were just attributes that fell off based on last year, or his performance that we saw, based on his skill set that we know he has. I think a lot of it has to do with utilization. And Brad, I'm sure you're going to get into like how he was using the power play, so I'll let you have that one. But there were just big gaps. There were more than a few games where Hronek did not look like the best defenseman on the ice, to say the least. He did kind of bring it back a little bit in the latter half of the season, but not enough. If I'm giving a letter grade here, I'm giving him a C, at best C+. I want to see more from Hronek as a potential top 3 defenseman on the Red Wings, and right now he is that only arbitrarily because there's no one else.
Yeah, it's that old Simpsons chant, default, default. I think a C is fair for Hronek. I don't think he was put in a position to succeed. I don't think he was put in a particularly fair position. He probably still is the best defenseman on this team. I think it's him or Troy Stetcher, and there's not much of a conversation for anyone else. Should he be a power play quarterback? No, he's terrible at it. Was he asking to go out there? No, Blashill was the one who put him there, and he had to make the best of it. He did the opposite of make the best of it. I forget, who was it? Jay Fresh put out a player card where it ranks on a percentage scale, 0 to 100%, how effective a player is at any given thing. And, Filip Hronek's power play percentage, was 8, which is 8 out of 100 bad. Which is staggering. But again, the eye test could have told us that. We knew it. He ate a ton of big minutes. He was okay defensively. He was okay in the transition game. It was honestly his offensive game that was the disappointment to me, because he really did look like his first 2 seasons, like offensively, there's something there. Not that he's a dynamo, not that he's going to be Erik Karlsson or any of these guys, but like, hey, yeah, 40 points every year, a solid contributor, and it didn't happen this year. Like you said, he didn't score a goal for all intents and purposes. Secondary assists galore, which means he wasn't generating goals. He didn't score any, and he wasn't the primary setup man for many, which is hugely disappointing. Obviously, a good chunk of that is a testament to what he was working with, but only some, because he was on the Red Wings' top power play unit, which did prominently feature Filip Zadina and Dylan Larkin and Michael Rasmussen, guys who are known to be pretty good at this thing. So it's not like he was the guy getting paraded out with Sam Gagner and got Valtteri Filppula on the second unit. He had players to work with on the power play. So he was put in an impossible situation And I sympathize with him for that, but he didn't do a lot with it, is the reality of it.
Yeah, I think if you would have told me that Filip Hronek's only 2 goals this season would be long bomb, Hail Mary, empty nets, I'd say you're crazy. Because that is not the sort of expectations I would have had for Filip Hronek. But I think what's clear to me this year is he either needs better people around them or he needs to move down the depth chart when the time's right, because clearly being a number 1 or a number 2 guy is not for him. And, you know, when his offense wasn't clicking, his defense wasn't great either. So, you know, if you just looked at the box score at the end of the year, you'd say, oh, Filip Hronek was all right. But when you look a little deeper into it and where those counting stats came from, yeah, for me, the letter grade I thought off the top of my head was a C. Sure, he had a bunch of assists and whatever. But on a night-to-night basis, I don't think he was very good.
Yeah, and like the theme across the entire review is that there are certain players who were bad, and there are certain players who are in a system that is not conducive to production for anyone. It's just not good for them. It's not conducive for any player's production. You're on a team with no offensive talent that's schemed defensively that is going to suck all counting stats dry. And I don't think it's fair to pin, like you've both mentioned, it's not fair to pin this completely on Hronek, but as this team improves and maybe he's given some help on defense, like if Moritz Seider has a big rookie season, that should take some pressure off Hronek. You would want to see this bounce back. This needs to be a spring and not just a continuous fall. And so if over the next season or season and a half, we do continue to see Hronek play at this level, that's a big concern. But for now, we kind of just have to hope it's chalked up to this is just, he's been a victim of circumstance and a down year. And he really is one of those players who has to come back next year. All right. I don't even know what to do. Maybe let's go with Hronek's partner here, for better or worse, is often Danny DeKeyser, or at least was through some points in the season. How are we evaluating Danny DeKeyser? I'm going to let one of you open with this one.
All right. So the thing working in Danny DeKeyser's favor in these rankings is my expectations for him going into the season were catastrophically low. So the bar was basically on the floor. That being said, he just barely cleared it. He did look better towards the end of the year. Watching him was a fascinating case study in you can see what he's trying to do. And for the most part, it's the right thing. His body just doesn't let him do it. Doesn't let him do it quick enough, powerful enough. He can't body guys off the puck like he used to. His outlet passes always seem to be a split second behind. He seems to lose every race to the puck. It seems like as soon as he gets the puck, if there's any pressure on him, he cannot evade it. And then he quickly runs out of options. He just naturally doesn't have the vision to make plays under pressure. So when he is unable to evade the pressure, he's just screwed. So that's context for saying I understand why Danny DeKeyser was very bad this year. And I absolutely feel terrible for him because for the most part, it's not his fault. But the reality is Danny DeKeyser was very bad this season. I'll give him a C- just because of the context. If we were just evaluating him as a player, it's a D- to an F. But he did all right with what he could control. And as the season progressed, which is important, he did seem like he was slightly improving. Again, another player that was put in impossible situations. Like he was put out in 3-on-3 overtime. He might be the worst skater on the team. He's the last guy that should have ever been hopping the boards in 3-on-3. And there were some highlight reel plays with him in overtime that were not for good reasons. But again, that's not his fault. He didn't throw himself over the boards. He was told to get his ass out there. So yeah, it's kind of like a pity C-, but it was still bad.
Danny DeKeyser is the yin of Filip Hronek being the yang. I had no expectations for Danny DeKeyser. So I really, don't know really how to evaluate where he finished at the end of the season. He's the oldest 31-year-old in the NHL for sure. He's the Benjamin Button. He gets a letter grade BB for Benjamin Button.
He is. You would think he's 36 by now, eh?
Oh, that guy, yeah. His life insurance policy is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he did score twice as many goals as Philip Hronik, so maybe he should be the power play quarterback. What the hell do I know? Yeah, I kind of feel bad for the guy. You can tell there's still something there, but he just doesn't have the tools to execute it anymore. Yeah, it's such a tragic story, really. Yeah, I don't know. I'm giving him a BB rank.
Well, what else is there to say?
Piss off.
You'll hear from my lawyers.
I think you both nailed it. Like, good guy. He suffered from injuries, which have taken away his foot speed, whatever offensive game he had. But again, his game came around where it wasn't a complete train wreck to the point where, like, outside of things that were out of his control, like you said, Brad, when he was put on for 3-on-3 overtime or given prominent power play time, like, outside of that, it was kind of just like, yeah, that's Danny. We wish he could do more. He wants to be able to do more. It's not really his fault. If this was a team in a cap crunch, I'd be a lot more upset. But for now, Danny DeKeyser is where he is until he's not. It's not great. They're not losing because of him. C- standard, whatever. Okay. The next pairing here, we'll start with the Troy Stecher half of the Stecher Stahl pairing. And I know this is going to be a popular one to talk about because I think you're completely right, Brad, in that Troy Stecher was one of the Red Wings' best defensemen all year, with the slight blip at some point when he kind of was injured where he had some rough play.
Yeah, don't let Jeff Blashill confuse you with those healthy scratches. Troy Stecher had a great season. I shouldn't say, it's not like this season came out of left field. We all knew coming out of Vancouver that Troy Stecher was very positively viewed in Vancouver, and fans and reporters alike were upset to see him go because they thought it was silly that Vancouver didn't re-sign him, especially for the money that Detroit ended up giving him. So we were anticipating a middle pairing, slightly above average defense, and we got more than that. Analytically, he was amongst the best defensemen in the NHL for the first half of the season before the injury, especially on the defensive metrics. Not the biggest offensive contributor, but we knew that coming in. But he did show flashes in the offensive zone. When he was aggressive, he was effective. He scored arguably one of the nicest goals of the year off of beautiful feed from Danny DeKeyser, of all people. Again, limited in his vision and playmaking, but good enough, good in transition, really great skater, really phenomenal defensively. So I had, decent expectations for him coming into the season, but he definitely outperformed them. I think the lowest grade I could give him on his season would be a B+.
I'm going to go in here with a B just because I think the blip in his game around midseason was a little bit longer than I would have liked. It was long enough where I started to question whether or not we were too high on him to start before his game started to come back. And as is Red Wings tradition, we got next to no information about the injury. So, how do you properly analyze this? But his game did come back, and I think Brad put it well. He plays defensive hockey how this Red Wings team wants everyone to play defensive hockey. Not a ton to be said for offense, but there are some flashes there that make it okay enough. I'll give him a B. I think B+ is a lot more fair, but just so I don't come in as too much of a homer, I'm going to give him a B. I think Stecher is fantastic for value. The money that the Red Wings have him at is great. I hope they extend him. What a solid guy to have on your team. If the Red Wings are good again someday and Stecher is still playing this well, he'd be a fantastic third pairing defenseman to have to put out in high pressure kill scenarios, that kind of thing. Really, really good.
Nope, couldn't find the mute button. Yeah, slippery little bugger. Yeah, and I've got a buddy who's a diehard Canucks fan. So as soon as I saw that the Red Wings, or he saw that the Red Wings got Troy Stecher, he texted me and said that we've got a pretty solid defender coming our way. So, yeah, he plays defense very well, better than I'd say almost anyone on the Red Wings. And he had one more goal than Filip Hronek this year. So there is some offensive potential as well. So, yeah, you know.
Is that going to be your bar all year? How many goals you had versus Filip Hronek?
Well, we've got how many more defensemen to go? You'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say B+. Like, we knew he was going to be a good defender. He did that. He had a little bit of offense, which I really didn't expect much of. And I think he's going to the World Championships playing for Canada. So clearly there's something there with Troy Stecher. And he seems like a hell of a guy. So I'll go with B+. I've totally liked the season he had for the Red Wings.
Based on who's going to the World Championship for Canada, Troy Stecher might actually be the captain, and I'm not even saying that to be funny.
I haven't looked, but I do have that open.
Kevin Ball is going.
Who?
Yep.
Yeah, guys are tired this year. They are not going to play more hockey right now. They're resting and doing things that aren't completely locked down, because that's what NHL players have had to have.
Oh, and Power's going.
No,
Anyways, I digress.
And Matty Benitez is going for the States.
And I think one of the best things that Stecher did all season was prop up Mark Stahl. Detroit obviously had Mark Stahl. They had to take him as part of an exchange where they got the extra second-round pick. And part of that agreement to get Stahl to waive his no trade or no move or whatever it was to come over to Detroit was, hey, you're going to get playing time here. This isn't a team that's too worried about who's playing what minutes. You're a veteran. We know you can eat the minutes. We'll give you a chance here. And that's what he got all year. And Stecher really dragged Mark Stahl up into being honestly viable. Good? No, of course not. But at times you're like, hey, Mark Stahl. My grade on Mark Stahl this year is a generous B-. Not because I think he's better than players who got a lower grade than him, but because all things considered and where he's at in his career, I think it came in not as horrible as it could have been. We saw flashes of Mark Stahl stepping up into the play on offense, whether it was the ripping the piss missile from 10 feet out right into the bar, or like dangling on the sideboards and making a nice feed out front. Like, he did it a few times, and he meshed well enough with Stecher where Stecher brought him up more than Stahl dragged Stecher down, which I think is an important thing. Not someone I care to bring back for the Red Wings, not someone who I think was actually, in a vacuum, a good player, but in the context of a terrible season where Detroit got paid to take him, I think it could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah, again, when I was talking about Danny Kaiser, I said the bar was at the floor. We got a second-round pick to take Mark Stahl. So that bar was through the floor and somewhere near the gates of hell when he came here. Like, my expectations were, if he plays, I'm pissed, because holy shit. He came in, his first 2-3 weeks were almost somehow worse than we could have possibly imagined. He almost became a parody of how bad he could be. And then a switch flipped. He wasn't an all-star, but he was decent to good. Teams were inquiring about him. He was a very real candidate to get traded to a contender because they thought he would help their team. Only reason that didn't happen was his cap hit. He showed more than a few flashes of offense that I was positive he didn't have in his game, which was a very nice surprise. And not that he was some defensive wizard, but he was sound. So again, understanding these rankings are how they performed relative to expectation. I'm giving him a B. He was fine. And I was expecting the worst player on the team, and he was far from it. So again, not a good player. Don't want to bring him back, but massively outperformed my expectations.
Yeah. Mark Stahl played for one team his entire career and then got traded to the Detroit Red Wings in the midst of a rebuild. The guy's making a ridiculous amount of money to play hockey. I can somewhat feel for the guy, it would be heartbreaking to do that. He doesn't have much game left, but he did score one more goal than Filip Hronek. So there is some offensive upside there. So, yeah, it looked like he still competes, like, despite, getting traded from New York. Like, it looked like he wanted to be there. And I think that's all I could really ask for, because, like, that's such a hard situation to have to be put into. I'll give him a B for better than Filip Hronek.
Look at us giving Mark Stahl B's and Filip Hronek in the C's. And that's legitimately just the parent looking at the smarter kid going, I expected this from your brother, but not from you.
Yeah, exactly.
What's happening right now.
This has nothing to do with the nerds and the superstars. This is basically just us just saying this guy had a heartbeat and wasn't a complete train wreck.
Like, objectively, Filip Hronek had a better season than Mark Stahl, but expectations for Filip Hronek were much higher. So,
yes.
That's why we laid that out in the beginning.
And those, like what we just named, are the four, I don't know, most prominent defensemen that you can give grades for. We'll go through the rest, but it'll be pretty quick. And I think it's worth having a little interlude in here where we recognize Nemeth and Merrill. I think those two deserve the highest grades on this team before they got traded, if not tied with Troy Stecher. So maybe me giving Troy Stecher a B is a bit low. Maybe it should be a B+. What those guys brought to this team defensively, I think, cannot be understated. We saw the effects of that after they were moved. And when you talk about guys performing beyond expectations, they're right up there with Stecher in my mind, where what they brought to this defensive core was really, really, it's no wonder they were sought after in trades, to say the least. Stecher will be similarly sought after next year, and probably was this year as well. It's just the injury might have muted that a little bit. So, those really should be the next two guys that we would have been grading, but they did get traded. So, who do I have next here? There's Lindstrom, Juice, Cholowski, and Biega. I don't even know how you rate those guys. Juice gets a C because he gave us some fun on offense, but sucked defensively. So
Juice gets a B for breaking that power play drought, and I don't really care about anything else he did all year.
Gustav Lindstrom, I mean, it's not like he came in and shattered the world. I think we shouldn't expect too much from Gustav Lindstrom moving forward. Not much to say offensively, to say the very least. But for a young guy in the position he was in, like, fit in defensively. So I'm fine with Gustav Lindstrom. He gets a solid C, maybe C+ from me. Again, sample size is small, actual impactful games small, but happy enough with his play. Anytime you see a C, if you're thinking, oh, that's such a terrible grade, it's just, no, it's more that you can't really, I don't know, in my mind, rate too much.
I can. He gets an F for fine. He was fine. He's C+, B-. That's the grade for fine. The good news is I never noticed him on the ice, ever. The bad news is I never noticed him on the ice, ever. So he is quintessential guy. Now, compared to half the Red Wings roster, that's a big upgrade. So he gets the average grade. So I'll say C+, because I want to be a bit of a dick.
I feel like we're on repeat right now saying good defensively, no offensive upside. Insert grade here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's flip that then. Who's next?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know before we jump to the next one, do you have any thought on Juice, Evan? Because I know we skated past him for you.
No, I do not.
Yeah, that's totally okay. All right, Brad, let's do it. Dennis Cholowski.
The one guy we kind of sometimes noticed offensively. The biggest compliment I can actually pay Cholowski for his half of the season where he was up was he looked competent defensively. Not great, never going to win a Norris, never going to be a Troy Stecher, but he didn't look like a complete and utter liability defensively, which he has for most of his career. So he's definitely made strides there, which is good. There were definite flashes in the offensive zone. He had that one where he had the beautiful rush, rang it off the post, and then decided the next game, you know what? That was fun. I'll do it again, and scored on it, hitting the post in the exact same spot. It just went in the net that time. His passing was probably the biggest noticeable trait for him. I don't know what it is with this team, and I almost mean this literally. Dennis Cholowski was the only person who would consistently make a pass and hit his teammate on the tape. Like, it's such a basic hockey skill, but Cholowski was the only one who did it properly and consistently. Him and Zadina. That was it. Anybody else, there was a 50-50 chance it was hitting the guy in the boots, if getting to him at all. So that being said, it also made note of him being one of the few defensemen who was able to properly transition the puck out of his own zone when it was on his stick. I'll give him a B-. He was fine. But I like him more than Lindstrom, so he gets a B-. Lindstrom gets a C+.
Man, I still think Dennis Cholowski's a black hole defensively. I think he's a liability defensively. I think the underlying metrics show that. By average game score, he was Detroit's worst player in terms of average game score. Detroit's expected...
Bad. Don't look at Zadina's.
No. Detroit's expected goals against per 60 5-on-5 without Dennis Cholowski on the ice was 2.36. Detroit's expected goals against per 60 5-on-5 with Dennis Cholowski on the ice shot up to 3.1. I think there is a noticeable difference with him on the ice. Am I willing to draw a hard conclusion on him? No, but at some point in the future, we're going to say there's only so many times we can kick the Dennis Cholowski can down the road. And it's unfortunate because it's not been a fair shake for him. I think we all agree the way that he's been brought up and sent down and developed has not been conducive to his success. Do I still have hope that he could someday become a viable part of this roster? Sure. I'm not at this point putting any chips on the table for that, though.
He's the only power play capable defenseman we have, so we almost have to keep him around out of necessity. And Dennis Cholowski is my biggest argument for the people who want to keep Blashill around. If he's some sort of defensive wizard, okay, fix him. This is your thing.
Not everyone can do everything, though. Not everyone can do everything.
I know. But you don't get to use that argument for one guy and then throw it at another guy. I'm just saying. So it's fine. He's fine. My expectations of Cholowski versus 2 years ago are very different now, but I still think he's a serviceable NHLer who can provide the one element of offense that the rest of Detroit's blue line absolutely, unequivocally cannot do.
I give Cholowski a C, and I think that's a generous C because I feel bad because he's been given a bad shake. And also props to him for coming in and just playing offense in the NHL whenever he's asked to. So for that, he gets a generous C that I recognize, in my mind, should likely be lower.
I have no opinion one way or the other.
I don't think we can in good faith give Alex Biega a grade. Alex Biega is as quintessential guy as you find.
He gets G for guy.
Yeah. And that's the Red Wings defensive core. And it's funny because you talk about all this and you're like, guys, that's a lot of bad grades. This entire team was pretty much asked to only play defense. If you're a defenseman who could play two ways, you were essentially told, if you were on the Red Wings this year, cover your defense first. We are not scoring goals. We need to keep these games close, be annoying to play against, shut down everything from the opposing team. And the Red Wings did that quite a bit. At the cost of a lot of offense from the blue line, although what existed there in terms of talent wasn't substantial. But still, Detroit did clock in throughout the year as an above average defensive team, and that deserves recognition. So, yeah, I mean, grades compared to our expectations were pretty low. This team was a good defensive team this year. It came at the sacrifice of a lot of offense, but there's no doubt about it. This was a good defensive team.
Yep. And, without looking it up, do you know off the top of your head which defenseman led this team in goals this year?
It wasn't Danny.
Oh, man, I should know because I just looked at it.
Was it Danny DeKeyser's 4 goals?
It was Danny DeKeyser with 4 goals. So if you're wondering why there weren't that many great grades given out on this defense, second was Troy Stetcher and Mark Stahl with 3 apiece. So that brings us up to an even 10 goals from half the defense on this team. Hronek with his 2 empty netters, Christian Djoos with 2, Dennis Cholowski with his 1, and that's fucking it.
Oh, shit. Overall grade for this team. Team defense. Count the forwards playing in their own zone as well. How do you grade the Red Wings team defense this year?
B-. I mean, they were one of the worst defensive teams in the NHL last year. I don't want to give it a B- because it heavily came at the expense of offense, but this is the defensive grade and they did it adequately. They were absolutely propped up by goaltending. Greiss and Bernier both had great years. But the shot share was down. The 2-minute running around like chickens with their heads cut off, pinned in their own zone shift still happen, but less frequently. Not as many blowouts, still blowouts, but not as many. So there was improvements. So, and I will say noticeable improvements. So I'll say B-. Let's just say the offensive grade's going to be vastly different than that.
I'm giving it a solid B. Yes, it did come at the expense of offense, but I still think compared to seasons past, this was an impressive way to see some things work well for the Red Wings. Big picture, the grade for the team as a whole will look different, especially once we start to talk about coaching and the strategy that led to this. But yeah, for me, a B. Yeah, they pissed off a lot of teams who really should have come in and ran them over, and for that, I mean, that deserves recognition. Was it fun to watch? God, no. I don't think Evan or Brad have taken more naps in their 30s or expected to take this many naps in their 30s, and that's because of...
You guys get naps?
Yeah, I've learned to sleep with my eyes open because of the Red Wings this year.
Anyways.
May I, if I could interject, speaking of Dennis Cholowski, guess who's leading the league in goals this year for a defenseman? It's Jacob Chychrun. 4 goals. Jacob Chychrun.
Yeah.
I hate you so much.
Yeah. I really thought there was an unspoken pact that we wouldn't bring up Chychrun. Because it's depressing, but
because I was like, well, because in a shortened season, I was like, well, what's defenseman scoring really like? So I wanted to see, like, is 4 goals really that horrible? Yes, it is. But someone like Pietrangelo has 6, but he's got a lot of points. But yeah, Jacob Chychrun has 18 goals. Tyson Barrie's got 48 points.
Yeah, because he's essentially the third forward on McDavid's line.
Yeah.
It just hurts so much more because I distinctly and vividly remember after Minnesota took Luke Cunnin at pick 15, I was tweeting pictures at the Detroit Red Wings Twitter account, pictures of Jacob Chychrun saying, this guy right here, do it. And my face when Bettman walked up to the stage to announce a trade, I almost stabbed someone. Now, to be fair, that trade worked out better than we thought because the extra pick we got out of it did turn into Philip Hronek. And even though he had a disappointing season, he's still a good defenseman and he's still going to be a top 4 defenseman for this team for a long time. And there's still some hope with Dennis Cholowski. But yeah, God damn, that was a bad trade.
Philip Hronek ended up 26th in the league for defensemen for points. So, I mean, it's something, I guess.
Yeah, but when you take,
I guess I'm trying to bring some optimism.
Yeah. All right, that's the Red Wings defense. We'll be revisiting the concept lightly when we talk about the team as a whole, but for now, that's the review on them. Very quickly here, because I don't think there's a lot of nuance to the situation. It's all pretty laid out. The goalies. Let's start with Bernier. In my mind, Bernier gets the same A-, B+ that he got last year. Maybe, I can't remember what we gave him last year. He did a lot of the same things. To the degree he did last year, no, but he came close a lot of times. He had a lot of heroic performances, that stupid 50 save loss or whatever it was. This is a guy who's played extremely well behind an awful team. He wasn't traded, and Red Wings fans were rightly not upset about that because I hope he stays. What a great thing to have a goaltender who can play behind such a terrible team and still put up the saves and keep games close. Yes, the team locking down on defense does help that, but also him playing well does allow the team to kind of get their bearings defensively too. Deserves a medal.
Yeah, the team improved defensively, but not to anything that would even be considered close to above average. He's still, especially towards the end of the season, as much as it hurt the draft position, the goaltenders, Jonathan Bernier especially, just stole points in the standings, stole games. The Red Wings really did not perform well down the stretch, but Greiss and Bernier did. Bernier, for me, gets an A, because I thought there was zero chance in hell he was replicating last year's performance behind a bad team, and he somehow improved upon it by 8 percentage points in a save percentage. Putting up a 914 behind this team is astounding. And then factoring in that the Red Wings did not give him or Greiss, it was a bigger problem for Greiss, but any goal support. They were the second lowest scoring team in the league. So Bernier did not get the nights where his team had a 2, 3, 4 goal lead and all he had to do was just keep them in it. Just don't let the other team come back. No, he was fighting tooth and nail for every save he had to make the entire year. So yeah, for me, Bernier gets an A. It was a heroic season.
Yeah. Once again, Jonathan Bernier is probably the MVP of the Detroit Red Wings. One, I will continue to beat the drum that he should get some Vezina votes from somebody, because nobody deserves the shell shock that he receives. And Greiss, I thought, didn't have a great start to the season. I think we were kind of scratching our heads, wondering what was going on. But he picked his game up in the latter half of the season. So, being a goaltender in Detroit right now is very difficult. And it has been for a while. So I've got no problems giving our goalies an A.
Yeah, I think Bernier gets an A- or an A, then I would put Greiss in just one category lower, just because he did have a pretty rough acclimation process to the Red Wings. And like you mentioned, Evan, it's not an easy adjustment. You went from the Barry Trotz New York Islanders to the Jeff Blashill Detroit Red Wings. Like, that is shell shock almost literally. He wasn't good. He was constantly among the worst goalies in the league in terms of expected saves and things like that. But at the same time, when Bernier went down with his injury, Greiss did step up in a big way. I don't put a lot of stock in wins for a goalie, even on a good team and on a bad team. Really no. So like when Greiss didn't have a win for a long time, I was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter though. Like Bernier didn't get a lot of wins last year either. It doesn't mean he didn't play well. But with how Greiss rebounded his game, I thought it showed that there is a chance that he could be viable throughout his contract to kind of do similar to what Jonathan Bernier is doing right now. As Detroit figures out their goalie future. If Bernier gets an A-, Greiss gets a B+ for me. Or if you want to bump that up to an A, then for Bernier, then Greiss gets an A-. It's worth noting that cumulatively across the season, goals saved above expected. Bernier did come up with a positive number there, so 0.9 goals saved above expected. And Greiss, because of his bad start and middle of the season, had a negative 5.7 goals saved above expected cumulatively across the season. So that's a stat doesn't average out. It accumulates over time, so just gives you a picture of the season. So I do think Bernier deserves a higher grade, but yeah, as a whole, I agree, Evan. They get an A. Goalies have been the MVPs of Detroit for the past few years now.
And you definitely can't factor in wins for goaltending in Detroit, because Greiss had back-to-back shutouts where he didn't register an ROW in either of those games. He went 1-0-1, and that one win wasn't even a regulation or overtime win. So, yeah, it was almost a meme by the end of the season of how little goal support Thomas Greiss did. I give him a B just because the beginning of a season was so unbelievably atrocious. I understand the transition's not easy, but it was bad. So... yeah, he gets a B, Bernier gets an A. They were easily the strong point of the team this year, though.
Okay. Again, as we wrap up the season review, probably next episode, we will be revisiting these as we look at the team as a whole. But for now, that is the Red Wings season in review for defensemen and goalies, player by player. All right, very quickly, guys, let's do some playoff predictions. And if I'm not incorrect here, Evan, you will be sending out the bracket challenge to patrons.
Yes, I've already sent it out while we were talking, so check the message inbox on Patreon. So the link is there. If you have any issues, just let us know. But the playoffs start on Saturday, so I think the predictions will be up tomorrow once the playoff positions and seeds are finalized. So yeah, it's coming up quick. So we didn't give you lots of time because we didn't have a lot of time. So it is what it is. But yeah, check your inbox. And if you have any questions or issues, just let us know.
All right, I'm going to read out the playoff matchups. You guys give your predictions and how many games. In the North Division, Toronto versus Montreal. I'm taking Toronto in 6 here.
Montreal always battles hard, but they are just not a good team. If Toronto gets any goaltending, this series isn't that close. I want it to be close for the entertainment value, and I don't fully trust Toronto's goalies. So as badly as I want to pick Toronto in 4 or 5, I'll go Toronto in 6.
The only chance Montreal has is Carey Price rises from the ashes, or Jake Allen continues to be a very good 1B goalie, or for some reason Montreal's depth is superior to Toronto. I can't even say that. I can't even sell myself on that. Or Toronto's goaltending is an absolute dumpster fire, which I'm not betting on. Man, I want to say Montreal so bad because having Toronto burn is one of the greatest pleasures of my life. I'm going to say Toronto in 6.
Okay, Edmonton as the 2 seed versus the 3 seed Winnipeg Jets. I will go Connor McDavid's Edmonton Oilers in 7 here. I think it won't be as easy as people think for Edmonton, but they will pull through.
I actually saw Connor McDavid's stats against Winnipeg this year, so I'm going Edmonton in 5.
That's fair.
Listen, I already said Winnipeg was getting bounced in the first round, and Paul Maurice was going to be the first coach of the Kraken. So I'm saying Edmonton in 3. But if I wasn't supporting my tinfoil theory, I'll say Winnipeg. I just love the depth on that team. I think Paul Maurice is a better coach. I think they've got enough guys that they need to figure out what the hell to do with McDavid. They need to figure out what to do with Draisaitl and then focus on McDavid, because there's almost no stopping McDavid regardless of how much you game plan. So if they can stop one head of the snake, I think they've got a good shot. But man, do I hate betting against those two players. But I'll say Winnipeg in 7.
First one off the board. Okay, in the East Division, Pittsburgh as the 1 seed against the 4 seed New York Islanders, who have not been hot of late. I'm very tempted to take Barry Trotz here, and I think I'm going to regret not doing it, but I will go with Pittsburgh here, but I think it'll be a tough series. I'll put this one to 7. Penguins in 7.
The memories of David Volek come flooding back. Islanders in 7.
Man, this one's tough too, because I don't want to bet against a veteran team with a Sidney Crosby, but betting against a Barry Trotz team that knows how to game plan that's playing with fire too. Recent form is very important, and I don't think the Islanders have been great as of recently, but man, that's going to sound like the worst take in about a week. I'll say Pittsburgh in 7.
Momentum in hockey is a myth.
You're a myth.
And importantly for Detroit, the 2 seed Washington Capitals versus the 3 seed Boston Bruins. Both because of bias and because I genuinely think Boston is obviously a team that can't be discounted. I'm going to go Boston in 6 here.
Ovechkin's been playing injured. God knows what's going on with Evgeny Kuznetsov. They're playing young goalies, and Taylor Hall has been on fuego. Bruins in 6.
Yeah. Yeah. This one's tough to pick too, because Boston has been insane lately, and they were resting guys the other night. So they're going to come in completely fresh and ready to go. And I got some questions about what's going on in Washington right now with some of their personnel and other things. This one's going to be tight. I'll go Boston in 6.
In the Central Division, Rod the Bod's Carolina Hurricanes against Nashville, who somehow went from deadline center to a playoff team. I think this is the best candidate we have in the league for a sweep. I'll go Carolina pulls it off in 4 games.
Sweeps don't exist. Carolina in 5. The gentleman's sweep.
Nashville's been better than Carolina in the last 10 games. UC Saros is apparently God's gift to goaltending right now.
That's fair.
I think one's going to be close. I think if Nashville can muck it up and slow Carolina down, they've got a chance. But I don't think it's great. I'll say Carolina in 6, but I think we're going to see some close games that don't go Nashville's way.
Nashville needs to find some goals. I have no idea where those are going to come from for them, unfortunately.
Me neither. And Carolina has great goaltending right now, so good luck.
What should be the best series in hockey, and one that's we've deserved for a long time as fans? The Battle of Florida, the 2-seed Florida Panthers against the 3rd-seed Tampa Bay Lightning, the Cup champs. You consider that Victor Hedman's playing injured, needs surgery after this season, and the fact that I really believe in what Florida's kind of come through with this season. I think it'll be a bloodbath. And I think it's going to be fun as hell for neutral fans. And I think Florida is going to come through in 7 games here.
Ekblad's still out. Kucherov's coming back. Hedman playing hurt is still elite. Tampa in 6.
Man, I love this playoff series out of all of them. The bad blood is tangible, and I think it's going to be the best series of the first round, to be honest. And all 2,000 Florida Panthers fans will be so fired up because they're winning in 6.
And the West Division at the time of recording is not settled yet. Vegas currently holds the 1 seed. Colorado can technically catch them if they win both of their remaining games, even if Vegas wins their last game. Let's say the standings finish as they are right now. Vegas against St. Louis and Colorado against Minnesota. Vegas, St. Louis, for me, that's Vegas in 5.
Yeah, I'll agree. Vegas in 5. St. Louis has left a lot to be desired this year, and Vegas has been an absolute buzzsaw.
Vegas is good at every single position, and they are bigger and meaner than St. Louis, who were built to be big and mean. It is going to be Vegas in 5.
Now, if it does end up being Colorado, actually, whoever's playing Minnesota.
Colorado in 5.
Over Minnesota?
No, St. Louis. It's conditional if the positions flip.
If you take the Colorado-Minnesota series as it stands now, I think Colorado's a Cup favorite, and I still think there's a chance they get upset here. I'll go Colorado in 7. But
Minnesota's that team. Every time they get into the playoffs, which isn't always a thing, but when they get in there, they always seem to do damage. It makes no goddamn sense because every year they are the definition of mediocre. Then they'll come in and they'll beat a team and they'll make a run to the conference finals before they get thwarted by Jay Shiger or Nino Niederreiter when he was still there. But I think he actually had a Game 7 overtime winner against Colorado not all that long ago. Minnesota always just seems like that team that makes it happen. Then I remember Colorado's roster, Colorado in 6.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Minnesota only scored 8 less goals than Colorado this year. But I mean, I don't know how many games each of them have remaining. They both have 2 games remaining, so we'll count that as what it is. So they're not that far off, but yeah, Colorado's roster is just deeper, better. It will take a miracle or the wheels completely fall off of Colorado. I'm going to say Colorado in 6.
All right. That was our NHL series predictions to start, just because we were kind of forced to by the hockey schedule this year. We're going to jump into overtime. I know this episode's run kind of long, so we're going to go through these pretty quickly. Overtime on this midweek episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. We have more than one, I promise. They are the reason this show happens. They're the reasons we're able to do the things we do, and they are substantially better people than any of us three talking to you right now. We're going to start with Arjun Shankar, who says, you know, it's a crazy fact to think about. Eventually, Steve Yzerman will be responsible for more Stanley Cups than Scotty Bowman. I love both the optimism and the legacy tone to that comment.
I just love factual statements.
Yeah. Alex Zucco mentions that he has a preemptive follow-up to the fact that we probably already covered the Eichel news. How much would it reduce the asking price for Eichel to also take on Skinner, 6 more years at $9 million per, and or Okposo, 2 more years at $6 million per year? Maxim Prashanth, apparently earlier today, said the asking price is a high first, a top prospect, which is Sider Raymond, and a young top 6 NHLer, Bertuzzi or Zadina.
That would be for Eichel straight up.
I don't know if I'm interpreting the comment right, so I don't want to put words in Maxim Prashanth's mouth, but I think that's with the reduced asking price. Or no, I might be wrong. Anyways, what's the reduced asking price with one or both of Skinner or Okposo coming with Eichel?
Okposo's helps, but he doesn't have that much term left, so it maybe takes out the extra prospect, but it's still a very high asking price. Taking on Skinner's atrocity of a contract, that bumps the price down significantly. You're still giving up probably a premium asset, maybe 2, but that would probably be it with Skinner on there.
What about Larkin? This year's Red Wings first, not the Washington first, and 2 seconds for Eichel and Skinner. Is that enough?
I think that's too much. I think Skinner's contract is that big of a hit. I think if you flipped the first round picks and it was Washington's, that's probably in the range. I
don't think Buffalo
look at what's left on Skinner's contract, man. It's bad. That's like a top 3 worst contract in the league.
Jake Kiefer says, due to Colorado's cap space, stealing an RFA seems unlucky. Maybe unlikely. However, if they win the Cup this year, do you think it would be more likely for them to not match a high-priced offer sheet for Makar? No, you do whatever you can to keep Akil Makar, and Joe Sakic knows that.
Yeah, the salary cap is a myth. One of the big reasons offer sheets don't fly is because teams can always make it work.
Scott Martin, which is a great point of advocacy for reduced offer sheet compensation.
Yep.
Scott Martin saw a hot take a while back that said the next Wings captain to win a cup would be Sider, implying that Larkin's either traded or stripped of the C. Well, I don't buy either necessarily. What do you think would be more likely to happen? Oh, by far a trade. If it was one of the two, it was a trade.
He is not getting stripped of the C ever. You people know who Dylan Larkin is and know what he's like as a person, right? If you're thinking there is a remote possibility that gets ripped off his chest, you need to get that thought the hell out of your head yesterday.
Keep up the good work, Lariana, for head coach. Thank you, Scott. Third Man In says the Wings will need more elite talent to contend. One way to get it is to go all in on the 22 and 23 lotteries by trying to finish last next year to guarantee a top 3 pick, and with it, one of Wright, Savoy, or Lambert, and remaining bad enough the following year to have a decent shot at either Bedard or Michkov. What moves would be necessary to make that happen, considering they'll probably be adding Sider next year and Buffalo's going to Buffalo? What moves need to happen is you don't bring in any free agents that help. You trade Tyler Bertuzzi and you get rid of one of your good goalies and replace them with Calvin Pickard or someone who's really bad.
Which isn't going to happen. So the more realistic scenario is you add 1 or 2 pretty insignificant depth free agents to plug the few holes Detroit has in their roster for next year and let a bunch of the rookies take turns filling in those slots, which is actually probably the most likely course of action, because when you actually look at the Red Wings depth chart with some health, there's not going to be a lot of turnover next year. So what you've seen towards the end of this year is going to be pretty damn close to what you're going to see at the beginning of next year. Or I should say at the beginning of this year, not the end, when everybody was hurt.
Ghost of Podcast passes, what overall grade would you give to your pod? And then asks about other pods. I don't think it's fair for us to grade other pods. What grade would we give ourselves, though?
We get a 6. They all get a 9.
Oh, that's strangely sexual. Are you specifically thinking about art while you say that?
Oh, I get a few names come to the top of my head, man.
Evan, you're the only one allowed to give this pod a rating, a letter grade rating. What do you give us?
I don't even know where to start.
A, B, C.
Shut up, Brad. I'm using a numeric system.
1, 2.
It's out of 1,000, so continue. Keep going.
Okay, all right, we're moving on. Moritz Sider, Spider-Man 2 says, is the Red Wings' best path forward to dress all their best young talent for developmental purposes while also dressing a shitty goalie for tank purposes? Funny enough, yeah. As we just mentioned the past couple minutes, yes. Sean Chavarella says, hey guys, do you see a possibility where the Wings are not the team that trades for Eichel, but instead they're a third team in order to help the other team eat the cost? I was actually thinking that earlier, and I think it's a very big possibility.
It's a lot of term left on Eichel's contract. I don't know if they'd want to eat like $1.5 million and $2 million for 5 years.
Let's see what comes back, though. Let's see what comes back.
It would have to be a way better asset than any team would be willing to give up.
CNOD says, PSA, all games on NHL.com are free until the end of the season. Can't speak if that's for everyone, but at least for the Americans. Question, it sounds like Blash will be extended. Do you see an increased offensive mindset moving forward? He'll have more skill in the team next year, and we can't expect players to regress in points again. We're not going to see him become an offensive coach, but I will say I do think he will allow, if Raymond plays, a little bit more freedom for Zadina as well if Bertuzzi's healthy. Verona, we saw, was allowed to do Verona things. It's not going to be an offensive scheme. It's not going to be offensive systems. I don't think it's going to be as offensively muted as this year. Brad disagrees.
I appreciate your optimism.
Brad's Ouija board says if you guys could sign one UFA defenseman to pair strictly with Sider for his rookie season, who do you guys think would be a perfect fit next to him? Who are the UFA defensemen?
I don't even need to look to know my answer, just for the fun, the memes, and actually for the mentorship. Zdeno Chara.
Oh, that'd be so good. That would be so good. Also, it'd be so nice to not have to fear Zdeno Chara killing one of your players when he's on your team. Unmentionably nasty hot dog water says, I'm more positive about this season as a Red Wings fan. We've had bad moments, but a lot of fun ones. I'm conflicted since I love the Caps, but should I root for them to lose so the Wings get someone better? Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's a difference of like 10 draft spots. You have to root for them to lose.
Well, it depends. If Washington gets bounced in the second round, it's a difference of like 3-4 spots, and I really don't like the Bruins. I really don't want good things to happen to them.
Duncan Cooper is asking how we'd rank the Red Wings scouting department to the rest of the league. Any under-the-radar guys you see Yzerman bringing in to potentially round it out, or do you think he'll stand pat? Thanks for an awesome season. I live out on the West Coast, so I'm not able to catch many games. When I do, it's all Ken and Paul. Great pair, by the way, Ken Cal and Paul Woods. Thanks for keeping me plugged into our Wings. Looking forward to all of your content this offseason.
I wish I knew the scouts well enough to give a good answer here, but I don't.
This group gets a blank slate. They really are in their infancy still in terms of being under the Yzerman Draper regime, for lack of a better word.
Early returns look good and well above average, but the 10 years prior, the Red Wings would have ranked near the bottom of the league.
Evans Bingo Card says, what combination of first-round picks would you prefer for the Wings? Wallstedt, Lambos, or Hughes, Kosa, and why? Thanks for everything, boys. Hope you can get your vaccines soon.
I'll go
Hughes, Kosa. Yeah. And I think that's
the Red
positional.
Wings. Yeah. There's a bigger conversation that I'm sure we'll have at some point in the summer about even if Wallstedt pans out, why that's not necessarily a good thing. And Hughes' ceiling is way higher than Lambos's, at least right now. And that's a pretty big hole for Detroit still on that left side. So I'd rather get the heavy premium upgrade there. And that's not even factoring in. I don't think Costa is going to be as good as Wallstedt, but if you look at Costa's raw tools and size and athleticism, there is a reality where he could be better than Wallstedt. Not betting on it, but it's not the craziest thought in the world.
Logan Couture's broken ankle says, in interviews, Yzerman mentioned Mantha's age as a driving factor in the trade. Burt is 3 months younger than Mantha. If Yzerman sees the core group starting at the 2014 draft due to the current age versus current status of rebuild, it's hard to see Burt staying. What percent chance do you give a Burt trade, and when would you do it, and what would be your minimum return required? Very quickly here, I think it's likely. I'll give it 60%. In my mind, I think that's maybe a little bit more aggressive than some people were thinking. When would I do it? The moment he returns to his form before injury is when I'd start looking. And the minimum return.
Yeah.
Late first round pick, I don't think is crazy to ask for Bertuzzi.
Looking at what the Red Wings got for Mantha versus their production, I don't think Bertuzzi's return would be that far off of Mantha's. It won't be the same, but it won't be that far off. Also, nobody's trading for Bertuzzi until he returns to form, because right now, coming off back surgery in a season where he played 7 games, if I'm a good team looking for help, zero chance I'm giving up premium assets for Bertuzzi until I know he's healthy.
Tortorella's future golden boy, Adam Ernie's Dan Club, says Connor McDavid put up 33 points in 13 games after Ken Holland said he wasn't in on the team this year, leading to him only acquiring Dmitry Kulikov at the deadline. Just want to remind everyone how stupid that guy is. Drives me nuts. I get that when you're talking about most other players, you can't be all in every year, but when you have Connor McDavid doing this, you absolutely are. Anyways, the Caminator says heading to the terrible state of Ohio to catch a Griffins game, first live hockey in over a year. With that in mind, who is a prospect you are most excited to see get promoted from minors to the big league? This does not include prospects yet to play a game. Who was I most excited to see?
Are we talking about Griffins? Who do we want to see the most come up?
No. For the Red Wings, who were we most excited to see? Like they can't be prospects that haven't played yet. Like they had to have played for the Red Wings. I remember the Nyquist hype being really big. The Nyquist hype.
Yeah. Nyquist and Tatar was the one where like I was well into adulthood, so I fully understood what was going on. And when those two came up, I think that would be it.
Tate says, Evan, how's the golf game been? You should try to drag Ryan and Brad out to the course sometime and film some golf content. Keep up the good work, boys.
Yeah, it's going great right now.
His face. I've never seen such a genuine look of contempt from Evan on this podcast.
We live in the stupidest place on earth.
Ontario is in a full-on aggressive shutdown, which means even the outdoor things like golf are closed. For when things do open back up, we've actually talked a lot about Evan bringing us out and us filming it. So hopefully we can get to do that this off season.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I mean,
Andrew Williams says, considering we still don't know what's going on with Blashill, do you think if he were being extended or let go, we'd know by now? No, I think this is just the Red Wings being the Red Wings. Unlikely, but if Yzerman is planning on reassigning him to a different place in the organization, if that's the case, what's the best place for him to be? Thanks for the content, boys. Hopefully we can get to the home opener this year and have ourselves a time like the before times. I don't think it's likely. That doesn't often. Maybe temporarily until Blashill found something else. And I do think even if post Red Wings days, Blashill will find something else.
Yeah, and let's be honest, reassignments for coaches don't happen.
Stay Fresh Cheesebag says, hey there, fellas. Thanks for great coverage all year. It's definitely assuaged the COVID cabin fever. Love to hear Stevie Y's thoughts about the season, but he's got to wait for the Isles to get bounced from the playoffs before officially hiring Lane Lambert. Plus, he's working on fleecing Buffalo for Eichel. I'm sure of it. Cheers, fellas. Aussie for Hall of Fame. Stay Fresh Cheesebags. And last question here is from Slava Kozlov's doppelganger. who says, as the careers of current Russian legends like Ovi and Malkin are coming to a close, it's good to see there's new stars in the making like Michkov, Askarov, and then Larionov. It won't matter because Russia has its head up its ass and will never win gold. 2018 doesn't count because their toughest opponents were farmers from Stuttgart. Like if they didn't win with Datsuk, Ovi, and Malkin, then it's not happening ever. What do you think Russia's problem is with turning good prospects into good pros? Personally, I think it's Russian pros get too comfortable in the K, where they get paid just as well as they would in the NHL if they played for SKA or CSKA or maybe even Spartak.
Every league in Russia is way too lopsided. You look at the MHL, the VHL, even the KHL, it's super teams. It's the NBA. All the big problems with the NBA happen in Russia, but it also happens at the developmental stages. So it's tough no matter what side of that field you're on. If you're playing on one of the dumpster fire teams where you're just getting shit kicked all the time, it's not good for your development. And if you're on one of the super teams, you're not playing all that many close games. Or if you're a young player in the KHL on a super team, you're getting 4 minutes a game. So yeah. Unfortunately, that's going to be a problem for a while.
All right, guys, that's it for this episode. The next time you will hear from us will be Sunday, barring any monumental news that requires an emergency episode. But for now, make sure you are following us on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And if you go to the bio, you can see our individual accounts. Please be sure to follow those as well, because as news flows in, we will be commenting on it probably far too much. We'd like to thank all of our listeners for this podcast. The support you guys show is amazing. The patrons, again, really couldn't do it without you. The name level sponsors from Patreon, Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartel on behalf of the Sarah Garan Foundation, Brett Bailey, Terry, driver of Evans Furkwagon, Taylor Tadgel, Brandon M, Citizen High Five, Craig Kibble, Greach, Hana Lee, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jacob Turner, Jake Kiefer, Jeremiah Dobo, Joe Santangelo, Kalen Wood, Cody Stark, Kyle Hashman, Kyle McClure, Matt McKay, Matthew M. Rice, R.A., Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, unmentionably nasty hot dog water, Zach Spring, Andrew Bohan, Sam Bankson, Adam, I wish I could finish like Ernie, another former junior goalie turned golfer, Antonio Gracias, Connor Layton, and Evans Bingo Card, Jeremy Brocker, John Evans, Joseph Minama, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Matt Keeler, Old Fashioned Ass Lickin', as good as it gets, Stan Olson, Stay Fresh Cheese Bags, and Trevor Pevavar. Thank you all so much. We're off. We'll see you Sunday.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.